Hi, I'm Stan Houle, and welcome to the last of 4 trainings that HUD has created on how to prepare and review rent comparability studies. As I mentioned in the first session, new instructions were published in November 2016, and these training sessions are designed to aid appraisers, owners, and reviewers in understanding the process. In this last session, we will cover sections 915 through 919 of the Section 8 Renewal Policy Guide. Please note that the location of the guidance we discussed today can be found on the bottom left-hand corner of each slide. One more note. If anything said today or in these slides contradicts what's in the guide language controls. While the other sessions were designed for owners and appraisers who prepare these rent comparability studies, this last session is designed for those who review and approve or reject the submitted rent comparability study. Before we move on to session 4, I'd like to take just a minute to review the takeaways from our last session. I hope you have a better understanding of when a HUD-commissioned RCS is required. I hope you recognize the mathematical process for identifying a project's median rent, and I hope you know when a lender-ordered map appraisal can be used in lieu of a HUD-commissioned study. In session 4, I'm going to focus on the review of rent comparability studies that's been submitted by the property owner. We're going to talk about what we call initial screening and substantive review. I also want to discuss the communication between the reviewer of the RCS and the appraiser or the owner and the timelines outlined in the guide for those discussions. I'm going to highlight the process for owner appeals. And last, I want to highlight a seldom used but available penalty for those appraisers who consistently submit poor work. As with the other sessions, I'm going to cover a lot of material in the next 40 so minutes. After this session, though, I hope you will understand how to use the initial and detailed checklists, the importance of timely communication, what each is to do if the owner wishes to appeal the reviewer's decision. I'd like to remind you of a few terms you'll see throughout this training and introduce 2 new that we will use in this particular session. MARA stands for Multifamily Assisted Housing Reform and Affordability Act. GUIDE refers to the Section 8 Renewal Policy Guide. AE refers to HUD Account Executive. USPAP is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices. CA is Contract Administrators. Now we've added 2 new terms for this session, which are initial screener, who is the person responsible for noting that the information in the rent comp study is actually there, and a substantive reviewer, who is the person responsible for evaluating the quality of the material contained in the rent comparability study. Let's take a moment to look at the qualifications if you're an initial screener. What qualifications do you need if you are that person? If you've been designated to be an initial screener, you must have read Chapter 9 within the last 12 months. Now, you can be a HUD account executive or contract administrator staff, but you do not have to be a state certified general appraiser. What about the qualifications for a substantive reviewer? What qualifications do you need? Now, responsibilities for a substantial reviewer are more substantial, and therefore there are more qualifications for that position. For contract administrators, the substantive reviewer must be a state certified general appraiser, period. For HUD staff, ideally the person performing the substantive review should be a HUD staff appraiser. However, the department does allow non-appraiser HUD staff to be the substantive reviewer if they have a minimum of 2 years direct multifamily experience and have read Chapter 9 within the preceding 12 months. Now, before they can undertake such a substantive review, the regional director must authorize that non-appraiser to do that type of review. We've talked a little bit about who these people need to be, so now let's discuss what they do during the review process. We're going to move into more information on initial screening and substantive review and possible field visits. Initial screening. If you are the initial screener, you must use the initial screening checklist, which is Appendix 951, to determine if the information in the RCS is complete. If it's not complete, then you must contact the owner or the owner's appraiser for the missing material. If it is complete, you need to sign and retain the completed checklist and provide a copy of the complete package to the substantive reviewer. Here's an example of the checklist that you'll need to complete. You can obtain a copy of the Excel spreadsheet on the renewal website, the link of which will be at the end of this training session. Let's look at some of the questions for the initial screening checklist. If you're completing the checklist, there are several yes/no questions you will need to answer. Remember, at the initial screening, you as the screener are only looking to see if the information is in the document. You're not looking at the quality or content of the information. You should complete the top of the form, which asks questions about the property and the Section 8 contract. Below that is information you, the initial reviewer, and the information on the RCS appraiser. You'll need to complete that before you can move forward. All the information on the form you can find in the RCS. However, if it's missing, you have to ask for it. Some of the questions that you're going to be asking include, did the owner sign, date, and submit a cover letter? The cover letter is very important. Did the appraiser sign, date, and submit their transmittal letter? Is there a description of the subject property? Is there a description of the neighborhood? Is there a rent comparability grid for each primary unit type? Is there a narrative explaining market rent conclusions? Now, as the initial screener, you're not expected to comment on the quality of the narrative, but only determine if it's in the document. Your job as the screener is also to check to make sure that the RCS was submitted in a timely manner. Note also that the market test, if it was undertaken, and if that threshold was exceeded. If all the required information is provided, then forward to the substantive reviewer. If not, you should follow up with the appraiser to find the additional information. The guide provides very specific timelines for the initial screening of the rent comparability study. It really should be completed within 10 calendar days of receipt. As I mentioned earlier, the initial reviewer may contact the appraiser directly if allowed in the owner's cover letter. Again, a very important reason for that cover letter. If you need to follow up with the appraiser, you need written documentation of that follow-up. It can be an email or a letter if the submission is incomplete. Then the RCS appraiser owner must submit the missing items within 7 calendar days. Please note that if more than 90 days elapsed between the date the appraiser signed his transmittal letter and the date of the owner's letter, then the RCS must be returned for an update. Now, once the initial screening is complete, then you, the initial screener, will pass the document on to the substantive reviewer. If you are the substantive reviewer, then you have several responsibilities that we're going to cover in the next few slides. You, as a substantive reviewer, must assess and evaluate if the comparables, the adjustments, and the rent conclusions are reasonable. Now, you may not agree with every detail in the RCS, but your eventual approval of the RCS means that you have concluded that the estimated market rents are reasonably supported by data and analysis. Your focus shouldn't be on policing compliance with USPAP unless there really are significant problems in the research, the facts, the reasoning, or the conclusions. Your focus should be on ensuring that the RCS is reasonable, consistent with facts and standard appraisal practice, and complies with the terms in the Section 8 Renewal Policy Guide. When reviewing the RCS, the substantive reviewer must use the checklist that's on the website to ensure that all the issues are addressed during his or her review. Let's take a look at some of the questions in the detailed screening checklist. There are several yes/no questions on the checklist, including: did the appraiser perform a physical inspection of the subject? Did the appraiser provide information on the data collection for the comparable? Did the appraiser provide details on any data collection issues? For example, data that was not obtainable or was estimated. In Part B, you have the ability to comment on the appraiser's description of the site characteristics and improvements, condition of the subject property and urban design, and amenities and others that we will not go into today. Below each section, there's a space for you to comment on the simple yes/no answers. If you note anything unusual, we strongly encourage you to make note of it in these sections so that that information can be detailed later. Some of the other questions that you must consider are those dealing with the subject's market area and the neighborhood. Did the appraiser describe the market area appropriately? And did he or she provide information on access to schools, shopping, employment, and note any nuisances? Now, in Part D, you should also review the appraiser's explanation of the process for selecting comps and any explanation of the reasons why he or she excluded projects that are near to the subject that could be a comp. Again, there's space in each of these sections for you to comment if there are any issues that you find, and we strongly urge you to do so. You must complete the rent grid analysis checklist to help ensure the concluded market rent is appropriate and reasonable. Now, when completing the checklist, you're not expected to challenge minor differences, especially if they don't affect the rent. This form follows the structure of the rent grid, and you should use it during the review of the grid. Please note that if in the rare instance you are not an appraiser and the thresholds marked in yellow are exceeded, then a second review is required. Otherwise, no second review is necessary. Let's go into a little bit more detail on some of these triggers. In the rare instance where you, the substantive reviewer, is a non-appraiser and the triggers identified in Appendix 954, those ones in yellow, are exceeded, then a second review is required. The second reviewer must review and sign off on the specific trigger items. They don't have to be an appraiser, but the review must meet the minimum qualification requirements. If the two reviewers cannot agree, then a review appraiser must decide and their opinion will prevail. If the second reviewer is an appraiser, then this third step is not necessary. Most reviews only require a desk review and don't require a field visit. However, a field review might be necessary if the desk review raises major questions, the reviewer is unfamiliar with the market, the subject, the comps, or the reviewer is considering challenging the adjustments. The RCS review appraiser must conduct any field review. Now let's take a pause to check up to see how well you've absorbed all of this information. The focus of a substantive reviewer is all of the following except determine reasonable, determine whether it is in strict compliance with USPAP, consistent with facts and standard appraisal practice, and complies with the guide. I'll give you just a second to decide which one does not fit. The focus of the review is all of the following except. It needs to be reasonable, yes. It does not have to be in strict compliance with USPAP, but it does have to be consistent with the facts and standard appraisal practice, and it does have to comply with what's in the guide. Now, once the review is complete, then it's time to communicate the results to the owner. If your decision is to approve the RCS, then you need to note that on the reviewer's certification and notify the account executive that market rents are acceptable. Here's what the form looks like that needs to be completed. It's one page and fairly straightforward. If, however, the RCS is unclear or unconvincing, then you can ask for the additional information if the owner's letter permits you to communicate with the appraiser. If the shortcomings are minor, then just call the RCS appraiser. However, if there are significant or complicated problems, you'll need to draft a letter stating concerns in the reviewer's issues memo, which is 956. When you send the letter to the appraiser, please copy the owner so that the owner knows that there are problems. At that point, the appraiser has 10 calendar days to respond to your letter. The review appraiser should also copy the owner when responding. The sample memo here is a copy of a form that you can use to identify issues. This one is just simply for your use. After the appraiser responds, you as the review appraiser then have 10 calendar days to either accept the study or draft a decision letter to the owner challenging the RCS. Remember, if the reviewer is a non-appraiser, the RCS review appraiser must also review the RCS prior to sending the letter. In this letter, you can require the RCS to be redone and resubmitted, or challenge the RCS's conclusions and suggest alternative rents. If you challenge the rents, however, and suggest alternatives, you must develop those alternative rents consistent with Chapter 9, and the letter to the owner must say how you derived the suggested market rents. Now, the decision letter must also be signed by the regional office director or the designee, and clearly state the reasons the RCS is being challenged. List the owner's options and provide a firm response for a deadline. Then it's time for the owner to meet some deadlines. The owner has 10 calendar days after the date of the decision letter to respond. The owner can accept HUD's alternative rents or agree to resubmit a new study or inform HUD or the contract administrator that it will appeal HUD's decision. If there's an appeal or a resubmittal, HUD or the contract administrator can issue a short-term contract renewal at current rents. Any substantive rent increase will be retroactive. Now, the new study restarts the processing time. The owner must follow the steps outlined in the next slides if they decide to appeal. There are 2 levels of appeal, first level and second. To appeal, the owner must follow the steps below. The owner must submit written appeal with data. He or she must email the letter to the Regional Center Satellite Office Director. Now, the owner has 20 calendar days after the original decision letter or 10 calendar days after the date of the owner's response to file an appeal. The owner may also request a meeting or a conference call to be held within 15 calendar days of the owner's appeal. If necessary, HUD may consider a field visit to process the appeal and may ask for even more information during the meeting or the conference call. The owner must return any requested information within 10 calendar days of the meeting and the call. HUD and the review appraiser will review any appeal and any supplementary information that has been submitted within 15 calendar days of the later of the owner's appeal letter or the meeting conference call. In the letter, the regional office can then accept the RCS with the supplemental information, can reject the owner's first appeal and require resubmission, or propose HUD's alternative rents. If the owner is not happy, then the responsibility for action then falls back on them. He or she may accept or submit a second appeal. If the owner decides to appeal for a second time, they must provide a written reason for the second appeal and provide data to support their objections to the director's letter. The owner must respond so that HUD receives it within 15 calendar days of the first appeal letter. The owner's response should be addressed to the regional director, and after receipt of the second appeal, HUD again may ask for additional information and may ask the contract administrator to issue a short-term contract renewal at current rents. Again, any rent increases will be retroactive. The review appraiser and HUD will review this appeal and issue a decision letter to the owner within 15 calendar days of the owner's appeal. There is no appeal to headquarters. Just a word about record keeping. Remember that all reviewers must retain the RCS submission, subsequent correspondence with the owner, review materials and documentation, and review materials of RCSs that indicate any inadequate or incomplete submission for at least 3 years. Now it's time for one last material checkup. I'm going to make this easy on you. True or false? A substantive reviewer can reject the owner's study and provide the account executive with alternative market rents based on his opinion of the neighborhood. What's the answer? The answer is a substantive reviewer can reject the owner's study and provide the account executive with alternative market rents based on his opinion of the neighborhood. That's false. The reviewer must have justification for the alternative rents and must provide the owner with information on how the suggested market rents were derived. Now, the guide allows the regional administrator to act if an RCS appraiser's work continues to be seriously deficient. If it is, then the regional director should consider reporting those deficiencies to the state's real estate appraisal regulatory authority and or imposing or recommending HUD's administrative sanctions like limited denial of participation, suspension, or debarment. These are not used very often, but they are available. When we began this fourth meeting, I indicated there were 3 takeaways from this session. I hope you have a better understanding of how to use the initial screening and detailed review checklist. I hope you understand the importance of timely communication with the owner and the owner's appraiser. And I hope you understand what each is to do if the owner wishes to appeal the reviewer's decision. As I said in the very beginning of this training, the new Chapter 9 contains very few policy changes. What we've tried to do is to make the chapter more user-friendly. During these sessions, however, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of some specific sections in the chapter. We noted that there were alternatives to RCS if the owner is renewing under Option 2. We went into depth explaining how to analyze the subject to include any proposed repairs, and we discussed what happens if there are insufficient comparables. We also talked about valuing non-shelter services and pointed out where some errors had been made in the past when undertaking a rent comparability study. I also hope you have a better understanding of when a HUD-commissioned rent comparability study is required. I hope you understand how to identify a project's median rent and the role of a HUD-ordered map appraisal. For those of you reviewing the RCS, I hope these trainings have provided you with background into using the new checklists, the importance of timely communication, and the procedure for reviewing owner appeals. Again, here is the information on the Section 8 Renewal website, which includes the Renewal Policy Guide, the memo on using the map appraisal in lieu of the HUD RCS, the median zip code numbers, and all of the review checklists. Thanks for viewing this training. If you've not already done so, please access the other sessions that are available on the Section 8 Renewal website.